It's been a long time since we've seen one of these movies. Starting in 1968, the Planet of the Apes franchise has been one of the most prolific and popular science fiction series that has often delved into deep and complex topics. Obviously, the first movie focused on civil rights and the perspective of how governments can lie to their people in order to preserve power. You know, this whole aspect of the series has been evident since the beginning, but later sequels dived into other ideas of morality as well, and how we view the Earth around us and the people in it. And with this movie, I think the franchise has further established just how much of a juggernaut it is for the science fiction genre, and why Hollywood has absolutely no excuse for making poor movies in the modern day. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a 2024 science fiction adventure movie directed by Wes Ball. It stars Owen Teague, Freya Allen, Kevin Durand, and Peter McCann, with William H. Macy, who looks like he's been stuck on Site B for a really long time. Now, this movie is of course a sequel to 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes, picking up the story some 300 years later after Caesar dies. That ape is now looked at as this sort of Jesus Christ figure, and a new young ape named Noah is set up to be the protagonist in what is essentially a story that focuses on the perversion of Caesar's teachings and a bit of a retelling of sections from the book of Genesis, culminating in a very powerful climax that my dad even leaned over to me in the theater and mentioned, "This movie definitely took some inspiration from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom." Now, first things first, I gotta be honest with you guys, when it comes to the Planet of the Apes franchise, I'm a big fan in general. I love the classic Charlton Heston movie, and the sequels, for the most part, were imaginative and fun at the very least. I would go as far as to say that it's not quite as good as Dawn or War for the Planet of the Apes, but those were extremely good movies, and I did rewatch Rise right after seeing Kingdom. And I think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I might actually side more with Rise, that's the better movie, but right out of the theater, I did think Kingdom was better. All in all, if you don't know much about these newer rebooted Planet of the Apes movies, that's high praise, because honestly, in the last 10 years, I really do think that the rebooted Planet of the Apes trilogy is one of the best trilogies ever made, and particularly from the whole reboot, legacy, sequel, revival movement that happened in the 2010s, because if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of those started off pretty good and then crashed and burned really, really hard. And I gotta say, honestly, this is probably the best science fiction movie Hollywood has made in a very, very long time from a big classic IP sort of perspective. And I'll talk more about that later, but I don't think Hollywood has any more excuses. Like, if they can make a movie like this, which is actually ranking really high on a lot of aggregate websites and general fan opinions and appeal, they've got nothing to really hide from anymore. Like, they need to make better movies. This is a film that, for all intents and purposes, is way better than most of what we've seen lately. One of the things I really liked about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the beautiful visual effects. And it's so interesting because I've seen a lot of people, try to compare it with Avatar: Way of Water. There's an extensive use of CGI, but it's very good CGI. And it's CGI that not only looks lifelike, but it makes sense for the world in which they've created for the Planet of the Apes universe. And I don't know, there's something about this movie in particular that feels far more fantasy, and it's because they're in the future like 300 years later, but it looks real. This is grounded sci-fi, and it puts a lot of other franchises to shame, especially coming from Disney, which is even weirder. When they bought out 20th Century Fox, I don't think a lot of people thought that Disney would do this franchise good at all, because quite frankly, they're not a good brand anymore. They're not a good company. They make pretty mediocre products. But again, this movie does prove Hollywood wrong. And the budget, I think, was somewhere around 160 million. I'm pretty sure it was under 200, which is very interesting because of inflation, and also the fact that the movie looks as good as it does and just is as good as it is. I think that this is honestly a testament that you don't have to, and I know $160 million is a lot of money, but you don't have to spend 250 million or the inflated budgets that we heard from Fallen Kingdom and Jurassic World Dominion. Outrageous in comparison to this, because this looks really good, and it is very good. Which brings me to the story. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has one of the most interesting stories I've seen in one of the more classic science fiction like film franchises that they've revived from the dead. This story plays a lot on older, it's kind of what human culture has been built upon for a very, very long time, tapping into older ideas of floods, of even hero's journey style things, and even Julius Caesar in particular. I thought it was a very interesting thing that the movie kind of dived into, and it was fun. This is good high-level science fiction. But probably the thing that shocked me the most was the writing for the film, because look, we've seen so many movies over the last 10 years that have just been truly terribly written, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is much better. Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver did not write this one, but they were responsible for producing the movie, and they kind of handed off their work to Wes Ball and the new team. The fact that they were able to carry over what they did on the first few Planet of the Apes movie like reboot series into this, it's shocking. This movie is better written than like 90% of blockbusters today. And I know that we could blame Disney and the MCU for a lot of the more lowbrow, comedic, stupid humor that we get. They didn't start off that way. And it's just interesting to see this movie kind of circle back around with a lower budget and a much more powerful sense of storytelling that we haven't seen in a while. I genuinely think this is a worthy entry in the Planet of the Apes series, especially the rebooted entry. I was very surprised and happy when I got out of the theater. And this kind of brings me to the modern state of movies in general, because I think modern film criticism is kind of lacking in a lot of areas. You do have people that obviously, they can see that there's a problem going on in Hollywood, and they frame it almost like Hollywood can absolutely do nothing right, or we'll never get good movies again. But then a movie like this comes along and it's like, yeah, that's not really true. I think if you see something that's good and you want to see more of it, you should tell them, hey, this is a good direction, take everything in. If you see something bad, obviously, like I could not stand the latest Jurassic World movie. We're going to go more into that later, because the original Jurassic World, Jurassic Park 4, actually had the same writing team as what did the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy. So this movie is what I would have loved to have seen more of in those Jurassic Park sequels, and it's something that I would have loved to see more of in Star Wars actually too. This is very good sci-fi. So the story of the movie is basically about this ape named Noah, and he's kind of this prodigy sort of guy. His dad raises eagles. He is in this new ape society that's kind of like jettisoned all over the world into different tribes after the events of War for the Planet of the Apes, and something goes sideways. The movie kind of turns into, without giving any spoilers, ape versus ape. It reminded me a lot of Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I personally think the characters in this movie are great. My favorite being this new character called Raka. He's pretty great in every scene you see him in. He's very, very much so philosophically inclined ape. He's kind of a mentor Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of character for Noah. And I don't know, there's something about this movie and the way that it carries out. I've seen some people say it's too slow. I disagree. I think audiences are too stupid, because if you go back and watch the blockbusters of days, past, like Jurassic Park or Aliens or something like that, those movies actually took their time to build up into like a really big story. So Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is just a classic blockbuster. It's a blockbuster that we would have seen a long time ago, and it unfortunately got kind of like thrown to the wayside because of how stupid things have become. In the time since Caesar has passed away from War for the Planet of the Apes, his teachings have become kind of diluted, and he becomes this sort of Jesus Christ figure for the apes. Raka even says something like Caesar will forgive, like when he's doing something in relation to the world and the story. I thought that was very interesting, because you've got this other group of apes that have kind of taken what he did and kind of conquered other apes, and their leader, known as Proximus Caesar, gets a lot of his worldview and history from Julius Caesar, from Roman history. I loved all of that. I thought that was very interesting, and it was a good way for the Planet of the Apes series to kind of like show how we eventually end up to the Charlton Heston original. And I am still wondering how they're going to do that, because I did rewatch Rise and they actually have the spaceship get lost. So I'd love to see how they actually tackle that going forward, if they're going to loop back around. There's some great stuff in this movie that is a very high art, especially visually and from a character perspective. Like I said, the writing is very, very good comparatively to a lot of other blockbusters today. And one of the things I like the most about it was just the idea of the apes in general being sort of tied, like their evolution is corresponding to like the biblical narrative of like Noah's flood. Obviously, the main ape's name is Noah. But like, if you go back to the story in Genesis, starting in chapter 6, you've got the sons of God coming into the daughters of man and bringing forth the Nephilim, the men of renown. Now, the whole point of the flood in the ancient Near East cultures, especially in the Bible itself, in Genesis, the point of the flood was because humankind had become evil. Every thought they'd ever done was wicked and wrong. And one of the things Proximus Caesar wants to get to is this giant giant tank full of weapons. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it just made so much sense because he's a conqueror like Julius Caesar. This flood is kind of like wiping away the evils that mankind is, ape kind in this sense. This was very intelligently done, and I know that's something that happens more towards the end of the movie, but the way it works is very, very fun. The way that the good guys win at the very end, I'm telling you, Mola Ram came to mind, and a certain way someone dies. So I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit. As a fan of science fiction and fantasy movies, this was pretty great.
Together, you will die.
You know, it's funny because when you look back at movies like the Planet of the Apes trilogy, they kind of are wildly different from the initial Planet of the Apes movies that came out in the 1960s and 70s. That being said, there is something that kind of, the way this movie ends at the very end, I have a feeling that they're actually building towards the second movie and the old series. I'm not sure if I'm correct on that just yet, but you guys let me know in the comments because it really does seem like they're going for the mute humans or echoes that they call in this movie on the surface, and then something else. There's even this little part at the end where they're like, you know, trying to get rid of radiation on a suit. Interesting. I made a mental note of that. I was like, okay, are they really going to go in that direction? One of the things I like the most about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the characters. Every single character in the movie feels like they have a purpose to be there. Every single character really feels grounded enough to where I believe them, but also the cadence of the story carries along in a way that's coherent and believable. There's some movies particularly, and I'm not trying to bash the MCU, but like lately blockbusters have just become kind of like glorified sitcoms, and people make jokes and, you know, exit scenes and come back in, and there's the same sort of recycled jokey science fiction feel that's more pulpy and comic booky. This felt way more serious, way more grounded, way more thematic and cinematic, and I think that's one of the reasons I liked it. There's this character, I don't even think they say his name in the movie, but his name is Silva, and he is consistently destroying Noah, and like just he does some wicked wild stuff. The CG on him looks really good, by the way. The way that they circle back around to when he kills one of the characters in the movie and then how he dies, and I keep thinking of that scene in my mind like after leaving the theater. Really good, man. Like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, if anything, it shows that you don't have to spend the most amount of money. You don't have to go out of your way to make something modern and cliche and very much so just wokey weird that doesn't resonate with a broad audience that is more catering towards, you know, fringe stuff. This is a movie that actually feels like they took the logical next step for the Planet of the Apes series while keeping everything grounded and into perspective and just honest and cool. There's little things in the movie that I felt were not only interesting, like the way that the apes use eagles, but the way that the movie actually like struggles with the ideas of good versus evil, as well as what happened to the apes back in Caesar's time and how the humans have kind of devolved into what they are now. There's some really good humor there, and even a aerial shot and scene that kind of reminded me of the long grass scene from The Lost World. There's something with this movie that just works. I'm surprised it does, but yeah, I can't wait to see what they do with the next one going forward. I think it's interesting that they've gone like in reverse this time. It is more of an ape story than human. You barely really get any speaking role from humans in this movie, apart from Nova, or, you know, which is interesting. I'm not going to go into spoilers. Like I said, this movie is well done, and I'm shocked that it was able to pull off a legacy sequel, or whatever you want to call it, a part 4, after it had been so long since War. You know, the environment and the blockbuster world from 2017 when War for the Planet of the Apes came out, dude, that world is gone. Like, we do not get that kind of movie anymore. So to see Kingdom kind of come out the way it did, it was very surprising. I think this is a good movie. I think it's worthy of the Planet of the Apes brand, but I don't really think I would rank it as good as Dawn or War. But to be honest with you, that just means it's a great movie and not, you know, one of the best Planet of the Apes movies ever. I think that the whole ape versus ape idea was handled pretty well as the biblical narrative, but I also think that there's just something cool to be said about the writing, because we don't get movies like this very often, and I want to talk about the relation to Jurassic World. Jurassic World as a trilogy has no excuse after seeing this movie. It really really didn't have any excuse after the previous Planet of the Apes movies because Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver wrote the initial draft of Jurassic Park 4 that Colin Trevorrow was going to direct. And then Colin Trevorrow rewrote that. And I still think Jurassic World's the best of the trilogy. And there's some great ideas in Fallen Kingdom. I've not seen any of those films in a couple of years, which is weird because I love the Jurassic Park series. After seeing Kingdom, dude, I gotta be honest with you, I'd kind of love for Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver to pop back into that because they took a world inhabited by humans and did the genetic stuff in Rise for the apes to, overtake the humans in a believable way, in a more Jurassic Park way than I would argue the Jurassic World trilogy ended up being. And I don't think they have any excuse. I think that when you look at a movie series like these new Planet of the Apes, this is Hollywood at its best. Which is a shame because they used to make blockbusters like this quite often. But yeah, in conclusion, I will say that Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a very well-written movie, especially for the modern day, a worthy sequel of War for the Planet of the Apes, and a film that I think wrestles with really good ideas of good and evil while also being kind of just well done in terms of writing, CGI, and direction. The cinematography in the movie is beautiful, and yeah, shocking. Didn't expect this movie to be as good. I thought it would be a pretty good movie, but especially coming from Disney, they just make garbage a lot lately. So yeah, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a movie that I highly recommend. Dawn, War, Rise, Kingdom. But Rise and Kingdom may be in fluctuation. I'm gonna have to rewatch Kingdom eventually. Dude, Rise is really good. I rewatched that, man. That whole battle on the bridge is intense, especially with Buck jumping after the helicopter. I've talked enough. Anyways, guys, what are all of your thoughts and opinions on Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes? And what do you think about the franchise in general? What do you think about that wacky Tim Burton movie? And how did you think this one kind of came across? I was very happy with the film in general, and I kind of want to see more movies like this. Whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be, love to hear all about them in the comments down below. Let me tell you something, brother. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it, and if you'd like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can be updated when I put out new videos. God bless you all. Christ is King. I hope you all enjoyed your time, and as always, take it easy.